Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to a strange noise and realizing someone is standing in the shadows of your kitchen, or your child whispering, "Mom, there's a woman in my closet." Sounds like a nightmare? Tonight, it gets even scarier. Hey everyone, horror fans, this is Tim, and today I've got 3 creepy stories from Reddit that really hooked me. I couldn't wait to read them for you. Here's what's coming up. The night a man was standing in our kitchen. My son thinks there's a woman in his closet, and my parents are holding human auctions inside our basement. I picked these stories for a reason. They're seriously intense, and I'm sure they'll grip you too. So if you love getting spooked with me, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Your support helps me dig up more stories like these. Now, turn off the lights, grab a blanket, and let's get creepy.
The night a man was standing in our kitchen. This isn't my story. It's my dad's. He told me about it years ago, and I've never forgotten it. He said it happened a few years before I was born. He and my mom had just gotten married and were living together for the first time. The house was out in the countryside, far from any neighbors. It felt private, but also lonely. It had a lot of glass windows, and my dad always said that mattered later. One night, my dad woke up thirsty. My mom was still asleep, so he got up quietly and walked down the hallway to the kitchen. He didn't want to wake her.
Then he heard a gunshot. My dad says the sound ripped through the night. The man had a gun and fired into the air. That was when my dad realized how serious this was. He stopped chasing and ran back inside. By the time he got back, my mom was awake, crying and asking what had happened. My dad tried to explain, but his voice was gone from screaming. My mom called the police. A patrol car arrived shortly after, and because my dad could barely speak, my mom had to tell the officer everything. The officer said they'd keep a car watching the house for a while. For the next few nights, my dad barely slept. The patrol car showed up sometimes, but most of the time, the officer on duty was asleep. My dad couldn't relax. He stayed up himself, sitting in the middle of the living room with a baseball bat, watching the glass walls, convinced the man could be out there, watching him. He said he felt like every shadow was someone standing there, waiting.
Even during the day, my dad says he felt on edge. Every creak of the floor, every movement outside made him jump. He didn't feel safe until they moved, but even then, he says he never stopped thinking about the man and the way he could have just come back any night. My dad says those days were the scariest of his life. Not the gunshot, not even the man standing in the kitchen, but knowing someone had been inside their home, close enough to reach them, without any reason, and then just leaving. He told me he can still remember the feeling of being watched, the way the glass windows reflected the dark outside, and the helplessness of knowing there was nothing he could do.
Low, fast, and dark. My son thinks there's a woman in his closet. "Mom, Dad, she's back! She's back!" My 8-year-old son burst into our room screaming, the door banging against the wall as he dove into the darkness where my wife and I were trying to sleep. "Richard," I groaned, voice thick with exhaustion, my eyes still half-lidded. "I have told you 1,000 times she's not real." He scrambled straight onto the bed and into Sarah's arms. She gathered him close without hesitation, soothing him with soft words and the hands stroking his back. "It's all right, honey, you're safe," she whispered, kissing the top of his head. Then her eyes flicked to me, sharp and urgent. "Mike, can you check Richard's closet, just to be sure?" I rubbed my face, trying to shake the weight of sleep. "Babe, it's not going to—" Her stare cut through me, colder than the night air. No words, just a demand. I sighed, swung my legs out of bed, and shuffled toward my son's room. We'd done the song and dance at least 15 times now, and it was starting to grate on me. About 2 months ago, Richard had first told us about the...
I'd ripped it open without a second thought, heart hammering, scanning every corner for any sign of a threat. But of course, there was nothing there. Just a neat row of clothes, boxes, and a few scattered toys at the bottom. This time was no different. I opened a closet door with irritation, and upon looking at an empty space once again, I closed it a little bit harder than I wanted and went back to our bedroom. "It's all clear, buddy," I said softly, stepping back into our bedroom. Richard was still curled up in Sarah's lap, his face blotchy with tears. She said it's almost time for me to meet her other children," he choked out between sobs. "She said you don't love me, only she loves me, and that she's my real mother." His eyes flicked up to Sarah's face before he buried himself against her chest, clinging to her like a lifeline. "But I don't want her to be my mommy. You're my mommy." "It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay," she cooed, rocking him gently. "You're not going anywhere with her. You can sleep with us tonight." I tried to catch her eyes, sending her a desperate look that screamed, "Absolutely not." But she wouldn't meet my gaze, and it was clear I had no sway in this. Sarah curled up with Richard, whispering comfort into his hair as his little body shook with exhaustion. I grabbed my pillow and trudged to the living room, resigning myself to another night on the couch. A glance at the clock on the way out, 3:45 a.m. Richard sat at the table, still in his pajamas, spooning soggy cereal into his mouth. Sarah hovered beside him with her mug clutched tight, her face pale, eyes rimmed in red. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "Morning," I muttered, grabbing a mug from the cupboard. Sarah only hummed in response, staring at Richard like she was watching him for signs of something she couldn't quite name. "How'd you sleep, buddy?" I asked, forcing a note of cheer into my voice as I reached over to ruffle his hair. "Fine," he mumbled, without looking up from his cereal. His voice was flat, distant, too old for an 8-year-old. I frowned. "No bad dreams?" "I've told you it's not a dream," Richard said quietly, but there was a tremor in his voice. "She's real." "Richard, please, it's not—" "You don't listen!" he suddenly shouted, the words bursting out of him like a dam breaking. He shoved his chair back, startling Sarah so badly she almost spilled her coffee. "She's real! She's real! She's—" The day felt endless, each task a mountain, each conversation a strain. I smiled when someone complimented a project, but it felt hollow, forced. Every text or ping made me flinch, half expecting it to be a message from home, a new terror, a new scream, a new worry. By the time the workday ended, I was completely drained, my mind frayed at the edges. I packed up slowly, almost reluctantly, thinking of the evening ahead. Another night, another battle against shadows only I could see. The thought made my chest tighten, But I knew I'd march back home anyway, because that's where my son was, and he needed me. That's when I had an idea. On the way home, I stopped at a local electronics store and picked up a nanny cam. It was a small, unassuming square with a tiny
"I love you too, Dad," he murmured, eyes already heavy with sleep. I stood slowly, careful not to make a sound, and left the room, leaving his door cracked open. I awoke in the morning, surprisingly rested. Glancing at the clock, I realized it was already 8 a.m. Sarah lay next to me, her soft snores filling the quiet room. I carefully swung my legs over the side of the bed and crept toward Richard's room. I gently knocked on the slightly ajar door before peeking inside. He lay on his back, blankets pulled up to his chest, staring at me with a solemn, almost black expression. "Morning, buddy. Sleep okay?" I asked softly. He simply nodded. "That's good. Are you hungry? I can whip up some pancakes if you want." Richard nodded.
I watched in horror, my stomach twisting with dread, and fast-forwarded the footage. About 30 minutes later, the thing returned, moving silently from the closet. This time, it carried something. A doll, pale and lifeless, cradled in its long, spindly arms. It set the doll carefully on Richard's bed, then glided toward the dresser. From a drawer, it pulled out a pair of pajamas and, with deliberate care, dressed the doll in my son's clothes. A soft, almost affectionate tap on the doll's head followed. Then the figure retreated into the shadows of the closet, closing the door with a faint click. I held my breath, watching the doll. Slowly, impossibly, it began to grow. Its limbs stretched, its torso lengthened, until it matched the exact height and shape of Richard. Even his hair was the same. The doll, no, the thing.
My parents are holding human auctions inside our basement. Dad's had friends in our basement since I was a little kid. The one rule in our household was to never question them, ever. I remember being 6 years old, eating chocolate frosting in our kitchen. It was raining outside, and Mom was teaching me how to bake cookies. She was making shapes in the dough, and I was sneaking chocolate chips from the pack. It was warm and cozy, an upbeat song on the radio. I was feeding chocolate chips to my teddy bear when the sliding glass doors behind me opened, a violent blast of wind whipping my hair from my face. I only had to see the silhouette of my father to know he had brought friends. I didn't like it when Dad brought friends over, especially new friends. Mom slammed the oven shut and switched off the radio, maintaining her smile. I let her gently pull me over to the dining room table, situating herself in front of me. I pretended not to notice my mother's frantic eyes, her lips silently telling me to stay as quiet as a mouse. Dad strode through the door, his arms wrapped around a girl who was soaking.
I could sense my sharp breaths, my hand clammy in my lap. The boy didn't move at first, coming to an abrupt stop. "Walk, kid," Dad ordered. Mom let out a hiss next to me, her hands tangling in her lap. The boy's voice surprised me, a low murmur. "And if I don't, old man," he sneered, "what are you gonna do to me?" I squeezed my eyes shut, counting my breaths. Daddy was just bringing his friends to play. I was suddenly too far aware of my father clicking off the safety. Back then, the click meant nothing to me. But looking back,
The sound still gives me nightmares. You know what I'll do." The boy dropped his arms to his sides, and with a reluctant hiss followed my dad. Dad wasn't supposed to be friends with teenagers. His other friends were teenagers, too. He took 3 girls into the basement several weeks prior, and they were yet to come back up. I was still waiting for them to appear, the knots in my tummy getting worse as the weeks went by. I liked Dad's other friends. They didn't have names, and even if they did, Dad refused to tell me. There was a hard-faced brunette, a dazed-looking, freckly blonde who kept asking me where her parents were, and my favorite, who had pigtails like me, until she lost all of her hair. I also nicknamed them Scary Eyes, Freckles, and Pigtails. When I asked Pigtails where all her hair had gone, her eyes darkened, but she didn't say anything. The 3 girls were sick. Their colors reminded me of my favorite cartoon, Blossom. Freckles coughed splattered red into her hands. Bubbles, Pigtails couldn't walk straight. Yellow froth bubbling through her lips and down her chin. Buttercup, Scary Eyes' teeth were black, like she has been chewing candy. I wondered if my dad's friends were dying. The girl's skin was pale, ghostly, almost translucent. When Mom and Dad were at work, sometimes the 3 came upstairs.
They were getting sicker. Scary Eyes had to hold on to Pigtails, the 2 of them stumbling up the stairs. Freckles was wearing a metal crown thing that she couldn't tear off. Dad told me his friends were sick, and he was going to make them better. I thought they were going to run away, but they just ate cookies and drank soda like they hadn't eaten or drank in days, asking me questions I didn't understand. Freckles tried to call someone, but the phone was dead. Scary Eyes asked me if I had a computer or cell phone, and I told her I wasn't allowed them because I was too young. She started to get mad, her expression twisting. "How do we get out of here?" I was too busy frowning at the line of black seeping from her nose. She swiped it away with her backhand, lips curling into a snarl. Well, Scary Eyes had a lot of nosebleeds. She asked me what her name was, and I told her it was Scary Eyes. I don't think she liked that response. She got angry, throwing a vase at me, though I don't remember her actually touching it or picking it up. I was standing very still, watching her swipe blood from her nose, and then my mother's favorite vase was flying into my face. Before it could hit me, the girl dropped to her knees with a cry, and the vase hit the ground, shattering into pieces.
Scary Eyes was stifling the nosebleed, intense red seeping through her fingers. Freckles grabbed me, shaking me violently. Her face was slick red, too red, like she was painted in it. "Kid, how the fuck do we get out of here?" "She's a kid," Pigtail said softly. "Go easy on her. It's not her fault." "Then what are we supposed to do?"
They were my father's patients, I thought, as a naive 6-year-old.
Dad ruffled my hair. Then that's her name. I found the girl's ID in the trash a few weeks later, along with the others. Their real names were Violet, Risa, and Clementine. I never saw my father's friends again. Dad was busy for the rest of the week, bringing up trash bags from the basement. Mom was crying and wouldn't leave her room. I thought the girls would come back at the stairs all better, but they didn't. I waited outside the door with cookies every day, but the basement stayed shut. And now Dad was replacing them with 3 strangers. Brand new friends. Initially, I wasn't fazed. I was a kid, so I figured the 3 had gone home without me realizing. But now, Dad was bringing in new friends, and my tummy was starting to twist. I was aware of my mother situating herself in front of me. Her eyes were dark, underlined with shadows. I watched my father drag the soaking wet girl towards the basement door, the boys following in slow strides. Dad's new friends didn't look happy to be in our kitchen. The 3 of them looked like they had been to the beach. The girl was wearing shorts and a tee, feet bare, her hair hanging in thick clumps in front of her eyes. One of the guys wasn't even wearing a shirt, only long cut shorts, Ray-Bans perched on. I watched him duck down to pick them back up before my father stamped on them. Rosie. Mom said my name again. I felt her fingers grasping my arm. Her voice sounded strange, like waves crashing onto a shore. The boy straightened up and did exactly what my father told him. "Hey," Mom hummed. "Eyes on me, baby." Mom and I talked about my favorite cookies until my words were tangled on my tongue and I couldn't talk anymore. And behind me, the basement door opened. One shadow shoved through, and then another. The final shadow strayed back for a moment, and I felt his eyes burning into the back of my head. I sensed his slow steps, dragging himself before my dad dragged him through. The door slammed shut, and I immediately twisted around, jumping from my seat to pick up the broken glasses. Mom's arms were wrapping around me, pulling me to her chest. She was trembling. "Okay, sweetie." Her voice was the comfort I needed. "Why don't we decorate our cookies?" Dad's newest friends became a permanent part of our family. Their screams kept me awake at night, but Dad reassured he was just playing games with them. They didn't age. I turned 7 and then 8 years old. My birthday's coming and going, and Dad's friends looked exactly the same. Unlike with the others, I was allowed to talk to them. The exact same thing had happened to Dad's other friends, though Frickle's skin was almost see-through the last time I saw her. Her eyes were glassy, and I wasn't even sure she could understand me. Scared eyes spat out streaks of deep black. Pigtails was too sick to stand up. Dad's new friends weren't at that stage yet, but they were close. Dark hair had stopped acknowledging me completely. His eyes found nothing, no one. Not even me when I kicked the glass. It was in their eyes, too. When Dad first brought them in, the 3 of them were vocal, screaming at me, pounding on the glass. Mom told me they were in denial, that they were sick. In their heads, they thought my father was imprisoning them. "It is an illness of the brain, Rosie," she told me.
But as days and weeks and months went by, they started to resemble dolls with no strings, pressing their faces against the pane, staring at me dazedly, a vacancy in their eyes that felt like oblivion was staring back. On the day after my 7th birthday, I skipped down to the basement at breakfast to find my...
The claw marks on his head were evident of that, showing that he too had tried to rip it off. In the days following, even that began to dissipate. Before I found him standing, with his hands on the glass. Freckles' crown was tighter on his head, blood coating, clenched teeth. Blood. Just like Freckles. Gold hair started to bar black around the time he was fitted with the metal crown. The girl had a scary cough when I visited days later. She had a scary bandage over her throat. Mom and Dad made the rules very clear. I could not, under any circumstances, question Dad's new friends. But I couldn't help wondering why all of my father's friends were getting sick. They weren't sick before the basement and the crown of nettle. So I decided to ask Dad's friends questions in an attempt to understand their relationship with my father. Even when their hair was gone, scary metal crowns stuck to their bald heads, eyes overshadowed and sunken, Dad's friends had not aged. I had grown taller. I started a new grade, and had a whole new group of friends. I had aged 4 years, and they were...
No response. Dark hair was staring at me like I was a space alien, his head slightly inclined. The others were sleeping as usual, snoozing together. So I tried again. "Were you going to the beach?" I asked, and to my surprise, Dark hair's expression twitched, his eyes flickering. His half-lidded eyes found me dazedly. "The beach," I repeated, reveling in the sudden spark in his eyes. This was progress after nothing for so long. "Is that where your dad found you?" Dark hair blinked, his fists tightening. "Coachella." I frowned. "What's that?" The boy shook his head, a thin line of red dripping from his nose. "Coachella." His voice was a croak, eyes widening like he was waking up from a long dream. The boy's gaze flicked behind me like he could see something. I couldn't. We need to get to Coachella, right?" His hands bunched into fists. We were on our way to Coachella. "I still need to buy my ticket." The girl giggled into the floor. "And we haven't figured out where we're staying." "The hotel, moron." Blonde hair sat up suddenly, a small smile pricking on his mouth. It didn't match his eyes. When I pressed my face into the glass pane, the three of them looked almost like themselves again. Almost. And yet I couldn't ignore the crowns of cruel metal, the strips of white wrapped around their heads. They were still my father's patients, but I had never seen so much emotion before, even if it was just splinters. Footprints. We've had this conversation multiple times. I'm the designated driver, so I get leader privileges and can tell you guys what to do. I took a slow step back, a shiver creeping down my spine. Dark hair scoffed, but his expression, unlike his voice, was empty. He was looking straight through me. His voice was more of a memory, a ghost. "What's wrong with camping? We need to get the full Coachella experience, right?
Tents are like $10 bro. Well, you can go camping and get the full experience.
Coachella, ticket, hotel. So that's what I named them. I was sick of referring to them as dark hair, gold hair, and girl. After a while, the three started to become a little more responsive. Hey kid, Coachella surprised me one day with my name. I appreciated that his hair was growing back under his metal crown. He still hadn't aged, his face stuck in time. Coachella knelt on the ground, tapping on the glass. It's Rose, right? Rosie, I corrected him. He scoffed. Same thing. It was my 13th birthday, and I was showing Ticket how to play Fortnite on my Switch. Ticket was ignoring me, curled up on the ground. Hotel was snoozing on his lap. He stopped replying when I delved into Fortnite lore. It's not like he was talkative in the first place, though he did offer small grunts, acknowledging my words. The two of them weren't as responsive as Coachella, who was slowly regaining color in his cheeks, awareness in his eyes. It wasn't the awareness of the boy who my father dragged down to our basement. It was new, like he was a whole different person. Coachella was the only one who wore the crown of metal. Hotel had a plastic tube stuck in her arm, and Ticket had a blinking device stuck to his left temple. Daddy really was treating their sick brains. I had to smile. And he was fixing them. Come over here. Coachella gestured toward me, knocking on the pane. I blew a raspberry, my gaze glued to my game. Why should I come over? I could get your mind sickness. I want to show you a magic trick. I lifted my head. Magic isn't real. Oh. I slowly made my way over to the glass. His eyes darkened. Do you know how to get us out of here? Why would you want to leave? Dad's making you better. He let out a bitter laugh, drawing a smiley in the condensation. What if I can prove your dad is a bad man? Something sour filled the back of my throat. My father is not a bad man. Then I'll show you my magic trick.
Coachella knocked on the glass, his voice suddenly a lot louder in my head, slowly bleeding into my brain. It felt real, physical, like a bug skittering across the meat of my brain. Why don't you come closer? I did, my body no longer in control. In 2 heavy steps, I was standing nose to nose with him. He smiled, and with a jerk of his head, my feet were slowly leaving the ground. I couldn't resist a shriek of excitement, my arms trembling, windmilling. I was flying! Up, 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 I flew, throwing my arms out, led by his surprisingly soft eyes. I was so excited to hit the ceiling when Coachella staggered back suddenly, and I dropped to the ground, straight into my dad's arms. Coachella dropped to his knees, crying out and tearing at his hair. Fuck! I caught a single slither of red creeping from his nose. His gaze found mine, tragic, pleading, and pissed. Sit down, Dad ordered. For a moment, the boy refused. He jerked his head again, this time violently, eyes narrowing. But nothing happened. There was a sound like electricity hissing, and Coachella hit the floor, burying his head in his knees. Do not touch my daughter again, my dad spat. Do you understand me? I was dragged back upstairs before I could tell my dad Coachella was hurting. The basement was locked, and I was officially forbidden from going down there. It's been a year since I was locked out of the basement
I still heard their screams at night, so loud, raw, and real, like all they felt was agony. I told myself my father was helping them, but for this long. Last night when I jumped off of the school bus, Mom was waiting for me. She told me to go straight to my room and already had snacks for me to eat until dinner. Mom said I had to stay in my room all night. Dad was having friends over. I entertained myself for most of the evening, though when it reached 9 p.m., I heard voices coming from downstairs. My excuse was that I thought gnosis if my parents caught me, though when I stepped into the kitchen, dodging behind the refrigerator, our dining room was filled with men and women in fancy clothing, suits, and cocktail dresses. Drink?
The server looked a little too young to be handing out glasses of champagne. On 14, he scoffed. So am I. What's your point? I opened my mouth to reply, when Dad's voice startled me. Follow me, everyone. The server was quick to put his drinks platter down, eyes darkening. Show time, he muttered, pulling a phone from his pocket. Thanks for coming, Dad told the small crowd, leading them down to the basement. I followed hesitantly, hiding behind the server guy. Can I please reiterate that electronic devices are prohibited in this space, and if you were caught, you will be paying a penalty. I waited for server guy to dump his phone, but he didn't. In fact, he slipped further into the crowd, grasping the phone in his hand. Against my better judgment, I followed him. After a moment of standing behind the guy, he was either talking to himself or talking to someone else. Let's start the auction. Dad stepped onto stage, microphone in hand. Auction? The lights dimmed, small talk and chatter coming to a halt. Coachella appeared, his eyes a lot more animated, alert. I hadn't seen them in a whole year, and they still hadn't aged. Ticket was shoved onto the stage, then golden hair. The three of them were decently dressed. The guys wore suits, and Hotel was wearing a dress more expensive than our house. Dark blonde hair tied into a ponytail. Her dress was black obsidian, pooling underneath her. There were no metal crowns, no strips of white wrapped around their heads. I could actually see Coachella's eyes, his dark brown hair cut and styled. They looked human again, like actual teenagers, even if they had been teenagers for 9 years. S3, show them what you can do. Dad's mouth curved into a smile. How about the young man in the audience who is currently filming this? Coachella thrust 2 fingers into his right temple. Finger guns. Bang, he said.
For half a second I thought nothing had happened, but I was aware of a ringing sound in my head, getting louder and louder. It wasn't until I blinked away streaks of crimson, my shaking hands coming up to cradle my own face, when I realized the server was gone, lost in a vivid explosion of red. His phone was on the ground, still connected to someone. The screen cracked. Someone shoved me back, picking up the phone. I felt so small, so tiny, insignificant, disgusting as my father's daughter. Was our guest live streaming? Dad asked his man. Nope. The man stuffed his phone in his pocket. Good. Then let's continue with the auction. I stood frozen for what felt like a century, staring at the boy's torso, and what was left is on his head, a sludge of pinkish red poking from pearly white. The ringing sound at my ear turned shrill, and a screech clawed its way at my throat. Starting bidding at $3 million, my father said, the crowd murmuring. Through sharp red drowning my vision, I didn't see fear on these people's faces. I saw interest. S3 is the very first psychokinetic, Dad boomed into his mic.
He nodded to Coachella. "Would you like to demonstrate?" Coachella met my gaze, his lips twitching. Slowly his fingers once again pulverized his temples. I found myself staggering back, unable to breathe. "Yes, 3, my dad started to say. I said, would you like to demonstrate?" Bang! Dad was standing there 1 minute, and was gone the next. This time his whole body ripped apart, nothing left behind. I didn't cry. I should have cried, I should have screamed and wailed, but I didn't. I was half aware of bony arms shoving past me, a sudden whiff of my mother's favorite perfume hitting me in the face. "I apologize for that, everyone," my mum projected her voice, allowing the crowd to part for her. My mum's shoe went glick-glack across the stage. She kept her head held high before bending down and picking up my father's blood-slipped microphone. My mother was dressed up, a slender red dress and heels, her hair tied into a knot. My mum's smile was bright, her eyes wild. My legs felt like they were going to give way. Mum wasn't trembling with fear when Dad first brought his new friends in. She was excited, thinking back the way she squeezed me to her chest, her shaking hands going to my cheeks. Her smile, I thought, was forced, was to calm me down and reassure me. It was for them. Just seeing them filled her with a dissipation. Intoxication. When Coachella tried to run, Mum grabbed him by the hair, violently dragging him back, pinning his hands behind him. She slammed her hand over his mouth, forcing the others to their feet. "Starting at $4 million, she gasped out. "Going once. Call the police," Coachella muzzled to me. 2 more people in the crowd exploded. Scalded splatter in the walls. I saw one man get a face full of it, his eyes dripping, but he didn't even blink. Coachella didn't give up. "Someone called the cops, telling them my name is..." Mum kicked him in the face, forcing Coachella into the stomach. When he jumped up, she whipped out a gun, sticking the hedge in his temple. "Starting at $3 million, she said loudly. "Anyone want to go higher?" When a suited old man in the audience raised his hand, announcing a price, $5 million. A woman in a frock who registered as $5.4 million. Mum dragged Coachella back, her eyes finding mine. "Go upstairs, Rosie." I did it. I can still feel blood on my face, even now, after so many showers. Right now, the basement is still out of bounds. The auction has been going on for 3 days, and blood still coats the basement floor. Expensive heels tread in human remains, congealed blood. Mum keeps smiling, and these psychos don't even care. I'm so scared. I don't want to be scared of my mother, but I am. I think she was behind the death of my father. I don't know what to do. I'm sitting here and can't stop shaking. I feel sick. Mum acts like nothing happened, but I'm not about to go outside. On my own, I can go to school, but only accompanied by my cousin. Mum took my phone, but I found the old one in my drawer. Coachella was right. My dad was a bad man, but my mom is fucking evil.
Oh my gosh, this story is absolutely horrifying. The idea of a kid slowly realizing their parents are running something as twisted as a human auction in their basement is next level creepy. Those details, the screams, the blood, and the way Rosie's mom just keeps smiling through it all gave me serious goosebumps. Can you imagine living in a house where that's going on right below you? What would you do if you found out something this dark about your own family? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's see who else is freaked out by this one. Wow, that was super scary, wasn't it? We dove into some seriously chilling stories today. The night a man was standing in our kitchen, my son thinks there's a woman in his closet, and my parents are holding human auctions inside our basement. I'm still shaking from that last one. Which story creeped you out the most? Let me know in the comments. And if you've got any terrifying tales of your own or some spooky Reddit threads, share them below or send them to my email. Huge thanks for watching, you guys. It means the world. If you enjoyed this, please smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell for more creepy content. Wishing you all good luck, and maybe check your basement tonight.